They say the ground always feels solid until the moment it cracks open beneath you, and you realize how much you took stability for granted. The banging on my door was unrelenting, each heavy pound shaking the thin wood and reverberating through the small apartment I had come to think of as my sanctuary. Lily opened the door. "We need to talk about our baby." Justin's voice slurred through the panel, desperation and alcohol mixing into a harsh plea. I froze in my living room, one hand clutching the smooth curve of my belly and the other gripping the edge of the kitchen counter, as if sheer will could keep everything from falling apart. Through the peephole, I could see his face, red-eyed and unshaven, a man who had made a dramatic exit from my life only months earlier and who now stood on my porch crying. For a long, charged moment, I stayed still, breathing deeply, feeling the thump of my own pulse echo in my ears. Then I spoke through the door, my voice calm despite the tremor running through me. "You can't come in, Justin. You're drunk. We'll talk tomorrow when you're sober." There was a pause and then a thud against the door, his forehead or his fist, I wasn't sure. He started sobbing, rambling that Maria had left him, that he'd made a mistake, that he couldn't lose his baby too. I told him the truth. Yes, I was pregnant, and yes, the child was his, and promised to meet him in the morning. As I sank onto the couch after he stumbled away, my phone buzzed with a message from him. "I'm sorry for everything. I'll make it right." Words were easy for Justin. They always had been. That night, as I cradled my belly in the dim light of my living room, I wondered when actions would finally speak louder than apologies. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs strewn across the months leading up to my 28th birthday. The missed date nights, the secretiveness around his phone, the way he flinched when I mentioned our future plans. At the time, I chalked most of it up to work stress and the exhaustion of city living. We both worked long hours, I in marketing for a small firm and Justin at a flashy tech startup that valued appearances as much as output. By our first anniversary, we had moved in together into a one-bedroom apartment whose rent made my stomach clench each month, even as my heart fluttered at the thought of building a home with him. It was cozy and full of dreams. Mismatched mugs from thrift stores, photos of us grinning on hikes or at concerts, and a bed big enough for stolen Sunday mornings. We talked about traveling, maybe buying a house someday, kids far off in the hazy future. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt solid enough. When I found out I was pregnant, it wasn't with a cry of joy or a romantic scene, but alone on the cold bathroom floor, staring at a plastic stick that had turned inexplicably, unmistakably positive. 2 pink lines burned into my brain, aligning with the knowledge that millions of women each year deal with pregnancies in circumstances far more complicated than mine. I sat there for what felt like hours, my thoughts racing between fear and wonder, and the practicalities of health insurance and maternity leave. I told my best friend Barbara first. Her immediate reaction: a bottle of wine set firmly on the table when I declined a glass, and her compassionate questions about what I wanted grounded me in a way no self-help book could. She asked if I'd told Justin. I hadn't. I planned to wait. My birthday was in 3 weeks, and we had already invited a small circle of friends to our apartment for a modest celebration. In my mind, the moment would be cinematic. After cake, I would announce that we were expecting. Our friends would cheer. Justin would hug me, maybe wipe away a tear. It would be perfect. The weeks leading up to the party were anything but ideal. Morning sickness, a misnomer if there ever was one, hit me like a freight train, leaving me nauseous and exhausted at all hours. Hiding it from Justin meant faking hangovers at brunch and blaming food poisoning for my new gag reflex. Meanwhile, he grew more distant, constantly glancing at his phone, coming home late with flimsy excuses about traffic. I assumed stress or maybe a mid-project crunch. I pushed down the nagging voice that whispered there was someone else. Hindsight can be cruel. Still, I decorated our apartment, hung string lights and balloons, and baked the cake of my own birthday party because Justin insisted he would buy one and then forgot until the morning of. He left to pick up a store-bought dessert and didn't return for 3 hours. Our friends filled the apartment with laughter, music, and the warm chaos of people who had known each other for years. Barbara and her husband, Aaron and Sergio from Justin's basketball nights, my cousin Lana who was visiting, Maria who I had known since college and who Justin had always insisted we include in gatherings. I kept catching Barbara's eye, my secret growing heavier in my stomach and my heart, her nods of encouragement making the world tilt. Around 9, Justin clinked his glass and began to speak. His eyes locked on mine, his smile practiced. "Thank you all for coming," he said, voice smooth. "Lily is the most incredible woman I know. She's beautiful, smart, and she makes my life better every day." People odd. I felt my cheeks flush, a mixture of happiness and nervousness because maybe he had found the positive pregnancy test or maybe he was about to propose. He handed me a small, gift-wrapped box. All eyes turned to me. Phones came out, ready to capture whatever came next. Inside the box, there was no ring. There was a folded note. I unfolded it with a smile that vanished as soon as I read the words scrawled in Justin's messy handwriting. "I'm leaving you. You're useless and I deserve better. Your stuff will be packed by Monday." The world went silent. My brain froze, then scrambled, reading and rereading because surely I was misinterpreting. I looked up at him, expecting a grin or a punchline to a twisted joke. Instead, he shrugged, his eyes cold. He said loud enough for everyone to hear, "We're done. It's been fun, but I've outgrown you." Then he laughed. He actually laughed, like a teenage boy pulling a prank, and turned to leave. A few in the room laughed uncertainly, assuming it was some elaborate bit. Most sat in stunned horror. Barbara's hand squeezed my shoulder. Maria's face turned an interesting shade of white as she excused herself, claiming she felt sick. Inside me, something clicked. The pain and humiliation were real and sharp, but beneath them a colder, clearer sensation crystallized. Justin thought he held all the cards. He thought he was orchestrating a grand exit, casting himself as the protagonist in his story and me as the weepy ex. He didn't know I was carrying his child. He didn't know I had found his hidden credit card statements with hotel charges and jewelry purchases 2 weeks earlier while hunting for a stamp in his desk drawer. He didn't know that I'd seen messages on his watch, messages to someone saved as M with heart emojis, while he showered. He didn't know that I was not the type of woman to collapse under public humiliation. I am the type who quietly studies and then sets the board for the long game. So I smiled. I thanked everyone for coming. I cut the cake with shaking hands and passed out slices as if celebrating a new year, not the end of my relationship. It was my party after all. I would not give him the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. Barbara stayed the night. When the last guest had hugged me, mumbled their condolences or their confusion, and left, she sat with me on the couch in the half-empty living room and let me cry until my head throbbed. I told her everything. The pregnancy, the credit card statements, the texts. She wasn't shocked. She had suspected something was off from his behavior. We made lists of what I needed to do. Finances to untangle, doctor appointments to schedule, locks to change, tenants' rights to review. It was easier to focus on logistics than on heartbreak. That night I touched my still flat belly and whispered promises to the tiny life inside me. I promised to provide love and stability. I promised we would be okay. I promised myself that I would not let Justin define the arc of my story. The next morning, Justin didn't come back, which was a relief and also infuriating. He did text around noon. I'll be by at 7 to get my things. Make sure you're not there. The nerve. I responded with one word, no, and then called Barbara. She organized a protective phalanx of friends to be at my apartment that evening. At 7, Justin knocked on the door and froze when he saw Aaron, all 6'4" of him, standing with a suitcase. Aaron handed it to him and told him the rest of his belongings would be ready when he arranged a time and showed some respect. Justin glanced at me on the couch, tried to speak, and I cut him off with a calm reminder that he should consider himself lucky I hadn't changed the locks yet. He muttered that I always needed an audience. Interesting coming from the man who dumped me at my own birthday party, and left. It was around this time I discovered just how common postpartum and perinatal mood disturbances are. Not because I was postpartum yet, but because I started reading everything I could about mental health during and after pregnancy. The National Institute of Mental Health describes perinatal depression as a mood disorder that can occur during pregnancy and after childbirth, with symptoms ranging from persistent sadness and anxiety to fatigue and difficulty bonding with the baby. Distinguishing between the normal baby blues and perinatal depression is essential. Mood swings and weepiness that resolve within 2 weeks are common, but prolonged feelings of hopelessness and worthlessness may signal a need for treatment. My therapist later assured me that given the trauma I'd experienced, being vigilant about my mental health was not just sensible but crucial. Maria's abrupt exit from the party gnawed at me. 2 days after the breakup, Sergio texted me. He and Aaron had spotted Justin with Maria at a wine bar weeks earlier. They hadn't been sure it wasn't innocent at the time, but now everything fit. His secret credit card charges matched the dates of their rendezvous. I felt a twisting combination of anger and vindication. It hurts when someone you considered a friend betrays you. Yet I refused to confront either of them immediately. Patience would serve me better. Like the hosts of the true crime podcasts I devoured during laundry day, I knew that gathering information quietly yields far more leverage than a dramatic showdown. In the days that followed, I tackled the practical tasks that would set me free. I consulted a lawyer about the lease. Fortunately, we were not married, so there was no divorce drama. I opened a bank account in my name, froze our joint credit cards, and changed the locks. I scheduled a doctor's appointment and, with Barbara by my side, heard my baby's heartbeat for the first time. It was a steady, fluttering rhythm, otherworldly and grounding at the same time. I cried in the exam room, both mourning and celebrating. Life goes on. It was as if my body had decided to prove resilience by growing a new heart, even as mine felt broken. I did not tell Justin about the pregnancy right away. Some people questioned my decision, but I needed time. I needed to be sure I wanted him involved at all. Research shows that about 1 in 8 women experience postpartum depression, but rates can be higher in certain states and circumstances. I was aware that stress during pregnancy can affect mental health and that support systems are critical. Knowing Justin's pattern of caring more about appearances than substance, I worried that his involvement could add more stress than support. So I waited. Meanwhile, he continued to text sporadically about collecting his things, to which I responded with boundaries and set times. We met at a coffee shop 2 weeks after his theatrical exit. He looked haggard, the confident man from the party replaced by someone unsure. He rambled about feeling trapped, about how he'd been unhappy. I let him talk. Then I asked him directly if Maria made him happy. He blanched, stammered denials. I presented him with the credit card statements and the screenshots of messages. His shoulders slumped. For the first time, I saw him deflate. It wasn't satisfying so much as clarifying. As he started to protest that we didn't need lawyers, my clarity sharpened. I realized his concern wasn't about closure. It was about money. He asked how I planned to afford the apartment, claiming my salary barely covered half the rent. It hit me then how often he had used my income as a safety net while preserving the illusion that he was the provider. Without me, he was financially vulnerable. I smiled and told him I had savings. Actual savings, not just credit cards. His face drained of color. I explained that he could collect his remaining belongings under Aaron's supervision on a scheduled day and that I didn't want to hear from him unless through an attorney. The day Justin returned for his remaining possessions, I was out at a prenatal yoga class. I laughed at the combination of my clumsy attempt to warrior pose and the sound of my ex-boyfriend rummaging in my closet under the watchful eye of my 6'4" friend. Yoga helped. My instructor often began class by reminding us that maintaining peace of mind and mindfulness can reduce stress and support mental health during pregnancy. This wasn't just hippie talk. Studies have shown that mindfulness practices can lower stress and negative effect in pregnant women. Those sessions gave me moments of stillness in an otherwise chaotic time. As the weeks passed, I started showing. My stomach rounded slightly, my jeans grew tighter, and my secret became physically visible. I started planning the baby's future in earnest. I scoured websites for information about parental rights and responsibilities. I learned that postpartum depression can last 3 to 6 months, though it varies, and that nearly 50% of mothers experiencing it are not diagnosed. That statistic lit a fire in me. I wanted to create a support system that would catch me if postpartum depression took hold. I reached out to my mom, who lived 3 hours away, and explained what had happened. She cried and apologized for not being closer, but promised to visit often. Barbara started checking in daily, not out of pity but because she genuinely cared. The community I had cultivated over the years tightened around me. It took Justin nearly 7 weeks to put together that I was pregnant. At 17 weeks, when my bump became unmistakable and my social media posts included carefully cropped stomachs, he sent a string of frantic texts. Is it true? Are you pregnant? Why didn't you tell me? I have rights. We need to talk. I ignored them for 48 hours while I processed my feelings. He followed up with, I'm coming over. That triggered my response. I told him in no uncertain terms that if he showed up uninvited, I would call the police. I would not allow him to barge into my space. That boundary was met with silence for 2 days. Then there was pounding on my door at 11 p.m., which brings us back to the scene at the beginning of the story. I kept my promise to meet Justin at a neutral public place the next morning. He looked even worse in daylight. He had apparently spent the night weeping, a giant teddy bear sitting on the passenger seat of his car. He thrust a decaf latte toward me across the table. The gesture might have been sweet if I hadn't switched to herbal tea weeks ago because coffee made me nauseous. The small mistakes told me he still didn't really see me. His apologies poured out in a torrent. For humiliating me, for cheating, for lying about money, for showing up drunk. He ticked off reasons like a child reciting a lesson. I listened without interrupting until he finally looked at me, waiting for absolution. I asked the only question that mattered. What exactly did he want? He fumbled, talking about wanting to be involved with the baby, maybe seeing where we stood. I suppressed a laugh. The nerve. I told him clearly that there was no we. My focus was on the baby and on creating a stable life. His role would be that of a co-parent if he chose to step up. That meant legal agreements, financial support, and consistent behavior. When he accused me of being cold and calculating, I responded that he had set the precedent with his cold, calculated note. The difference was that my actions aimed to protect our child, while his were to protect his ego. When I handed him a folder with ultrasound pictures, my due date, and a draft of a custody and support agreement prepared by my lawyer, he flinched like it burned. Reality was setting in. For the first time, I considered that he might be as scared as I was. Not of being a father. He had always liked the idea of fatherhood because it looked good, but of being exposed as someone who wasn't in control. When I left the coffee shop, I felt lighter. I also felt the shift in our dynamic. Justin no longer held the power of surprise. I did. I had set the terms. I called my lawyer to update her and then called my mom to cry because empowerment and grief can coexist. Maria was the part of the story that still stung in ways I didn't expect. We had been friends since college, bonding over late-night study sessions and bad dates. I had introduced her to Justin, trusting her implicitly. Her betrayal felt like a double cut. About a month after Justin learned about the baby, I ran into Maria at the grocery store. We literally bumped carts near the produce section. Our eyes met and for a moment we froze like deer in headlights. Then she smiled, awkward and guilty. She asked how I was feeling. I told her I was doing as well as could be expected. She stammered that Justin had told her we were essentially separated when they started seeing each other, and that she wouldn't have gotten involved if she knew. I raised an eyebrow, not convinced but also not interested in arguing. She blurted that Justin wasn't who she thought and that he had lied to her about money and about me. I told her that sounded like a personal problem. We went our separate ways. Later, she texted an apology for her part in the situation. I didn't respond. Forgiveness was something I might reach one day for my own sake, but not because she asked for it. I spent my second trimester prepping the nursery, reorganizing the apartment, and building a network of support. Barbara insisted on hosting a small shower. It was not the lavish gender reveal you see on social media. It was friends gathered around my kitchen table, tying strings around my waist to guess the circumference of my bump, and making jokes about names. It was laughter and tears and a moment where I felt truly seen. My cousin Lana extended her visit to help me assemble an IKEA crib that took 3 adults and 6 hours to put together. Every screw and Allen wrench felt like a reclaiming of space. I changed the living room's decor, painted a wall a soft sage green, and swapped out the couch Justin had chosen for a secondhand sectional I could afford on my own. The apartment was mine now. It reflected me, mismatched, vibrant, and full of plants I hoped to keep alive. Mentally, I prepared for postpartum. I read that postpartum depression affects about 1 in 8 mothers nationally but can be as high as 1 in 5 in some states. I learned that postpartum depression often lasts 3 to 6 months, though it varies, and that up to half of those experiencing it aren't diagnosed. I read that risk factors include previous depression, lack of social support, and significant life stressors. I had many of those risk factors. I also learned that with proper treatment and support, up to 80% of people recover. That gave me hope. I asked my doctor to screen me for depression throughout pregnancy. I saved crisis hotline numbers in my phone. If a mood disorder knocked on my door, I wanted to be ready to let help in. Justin began to take tentative steps toward responsible co-parenting. He signed the child support agreement my lawyer drafted after his brief resistance. He showed up to a few doctor's appointments when invited. He asked questions that indicated he'd actually read some parenting books, like whether I preferred a certain brand of prenatal vitamins or if I'd considered cloth diapers. I answered kindly but kept our conversations focused on the baby. Our relationship had morphed into a business partnership of sorts. We were shareholders in a very small, very important company called Our Child. I was the CEO. He was a silent partner who occasionally offered input. It wasn't the romantic co-parenting I'd once imagined, but it was workable. Living in a small city means that news travels faster than a cold in a daycare. Through the grapevine, by Sergio who heard from his cousin who worked at a restaurant where Justin and Maria once argued in public, I learned that their relationship was crumbling. Apparently, Justin had promised Maria things he couldn't deliver. His job at the startup had never been as secure as he made it seem. He had been living on credit and charm. When he lost his job, Maria realized the Instagram perfect life he'd pitched her was more illusion than reality. According to gossip, she confronted him about lying to her and to me. They broke up. I didn't gloat. Seeing someone else's pain didn't make mine any less. But I did feel a sense of closure. The narrative he had spun about outgrowing me was unraveling. Justin's job loss complicated our financial arrangement. Child support is calculated based on income. Losing his job meant he had less to contribute. I worried. Maria told me, during another coincidental run-in at Target, that he'd been fired for poor performance, not some grand conspiracy as he claimed. She also told me he was talking to a therapist. That last bit surprised me. The man who once scoffed at therapy was now, apparently, paying someone to listen to him? People can change, I reminded myself, but they rarely transform overnight. He showed up at my door sober one evening, weeks after his breakdown on my porch, holding a small notebook. He apologized again, this time less frantic and more reflective. He asked questions about the baby's development. He seemed genuinely interested in the prenatal class I'd attended about breathing techniques. When I mentioned the word therapy, he didn't flinch. He admitted he had started seeing someone and was slowly realizing patterns in his behavior. He apologized for calling me useless. He said he didn't mean it. I believed he didn't mean the specific word but believed he meant the sentiment at the time. I nodded and thanked him. I didn't forgive him instantly, but I recognized his effort as a step in the right direction for our child's sake. Labor began not with a dramatic movie-style gush of water, but with back pain and the stubborn refusal of my contractions to settle into a pattern. I had been so anxious about early labor signs that when it finally happened, I thought it was a false alarm. Barbara, ever prepared, had her hospital bag in her car, just in case. When the contractions intensified to the point where I had to pause mid-sentence to breathe, she looked at me and said, "It's time." Justin met us at the hospital with a teddy bear large enough to require its own seat. I almost laughed when I saw it. We spent 32 hours waiting. Labor is a marathon and a transformation. Barbara held my hand and wiped my forehead as I cursed and cried. Justin hovered, offering water at the wrong times and breathing when I needed silence. But he stayed. He didn't leave when things got messy. When my daughter, Zoe, finally slid into the world, screaming and perfect with a head full of dark hair and a chin that reminded me of her father, I felt a wave of emotion I cannot capture in words. It was not just love. It was relief, awe, exhaustion, and a profound sense of reclamation. Everything I had been through over the past 9 months, the betrayal, the planning, the fear, culminated in this tiny, squalling human placed on my chest. Research I had read said that bonding can be difficult when you're depressed. In that moment, my heart opened like a floodgate. Justin cried when he held her. Not pretty tears, but messy, blubbering tears. That vulnerability made him look more human than he ever had. It did not erase what he had done, but it reminded me that pain often begets pain. I set boundaries. I asked the nurse to give me and Barbara privacy while I tried to nurse for the first time. Breastfeeding was harder than any YouTube tutorial had prepared me for. My mom arrived within hours, her eyes shining as she met her granddaughter. She rearranged my hospital room like she did my kitchen cabinets, which made me roll my eyes with love. My hospital stay was a blur of visitors, lactation consultants, and paperwork. I insisted that Justin sleep at home. He needed to learn to be present without being intrusive. When we left the hospital 2 days later, he strapped Zoe's car seat in with shaking hands. He followed my car to my apartment as if he might lose me in traffic even though we live 15 minutes from the hospital. Home with a newborn is like existing in a time warp. Days and nights blur. Sleep happens in fragmented naps. Meals are eaten cold over a sink. My body felt like a stranger, sore, leaking, stretched. I remembered reading that postpartum depression symptoms include fatigue, difficulty sleeping even when the baby sleeps, and feelings of hopelessness. Some days I worried I was falling into that abyss. But then I would look at Zoe and feel a warm glow that carried me through. I allowed myself to feel both gratitude and exhaustion. I called the hotline number saved in my phone when intrusive thoughts crept in. I told my doctor the truth at my 6-week appointment. She screened me and confirmed I had mild postpartum blues, common in up to 80% of mothers. She said the difference between baby blues and postpartum depression is whether symptoms persist beyond 2 weeks. Mine eased around week 3, but I remained vigilant. Justin visited Zoe 3 times a week at first. He brought diapers, takeout, and occasionally gifts that were more about his taste than practicality, like a tiny leather jacket for a 6-week-old. I found his attempts endearing and annoying in equal measure. He sometimes arrived late or canceled at the last minute, citing work emergencies at his new job, which paid less but seemed to ground him. Our dynamic was civil. We scheduled visits like business meetings. I gave him tasks during his time here, bath time, bottle feeding. When he struggled, I kept my comments constructive. There were moments when he looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, nostalgia, regret, maybe love. But that chapter was closed. My heart no longer pounded at the sound of his name. It fluttered for my daughter and for the possibilities of a future that didn't include him as my partner. A month after Zoe was born, I noticed the grocery delivery driver leaving small notes inside my bags. Try these lactation cookies. Customers swear by them, or here's a link to a sleep training blog my sister used. At first, I thought it was part of the service. Then I realized he was personalizing them for me. One day, as I juggled a fussy baby and a case of water at the door, he offered to help carry the groceries in. I hesitated, but something about his presence felt safe. He introduced himself as Eli, a student finishing his degree while working deliveries. He had a younger sister with 2 kids, which explained his ease with babies. He added his number to my phone in case there were issues with future deliveries. I knew and he knew that this was more than customer service. Our text conversations began with jokes about running out of wipes and morphed into discussions about environmental science and favorite books. When he came by for coffee, the herbal kind for me, I laughed at his dad jokes. It felt refreshingly normal to flirt over cold pizza while a baby snored in a bassinet nearby. When Justin saw Eli leaving one afternoon during a scheduled visit, his eyebrows shot up. "Who was that?" he asked casually. "My grocery delivery guy," I replied. He made a comment about moving on fast. I reminded him that he had moved on before we had even broken up. He muttered something about that being different and then changed the subject. Later, Barbara teased me about my cute delivery guy. I told her I wasn't ready for a relationship. She reminded me gently that I deserved happiness too. She was right. But I was wary of repeating old mistakes. I wanted to choose someone who saw me fully, not someone who loved the idea of me. I took things slowly with Eli. We went on our first official date when Zoe was 3 months old, a walk in the park with iced coffees and a stroller. He asked about my birth story. I told him the messy, beautiful truth. He listened without trying to fix or diminish my experiences. He didn't flinch when Zoe spit up on his shirt. I liked that. As the months passed, Justin's relationship with Zoe deepened. He read parenting books and joined a dad group on social media. He even attended a few therapy sessions about co-parenting. He kept his promises more often. He paid child support consistently after finding a steadier job. He signed up for a parenting class at the community center. He still messed up, like the time he brought Zoe home an hour past her bedtime because he lost track of time at the park. I set consequences and boundaries. He apologized and adjusted. When he needed to borrow money temporarily after an unexpected car repair, I declined. I encouraged him to budget and manage his finances. It wasn't cruelty. It was teaching him accountability, something he'd lacked when we were together. Our communication became more transparent. We shared a calendar app to coordinate visits, doctor appointments, and milestones. When Zoe rolled over for the first time during one of his visits, he recorded it and sent me the video with a caption that simply said, "She's amazing." I smiled and responded with a heart. We were co-parents now. Not friends, not enemies, but 2 people bound by the fierce love of a child. For Zoe's first Halloween, we dressed her as a tiny pumpkin. Justin wore a matching orange beanie. The photo of us flanking her at the community pumpkin patch looked almost like a family portrait. When I later posted it with the caption "Pumpkin with her people," I meant it. Family looks different now. It's patchwork and imperfect, but it's real. On the anniversary of the birthday party that shattered my old life, Barbara insisted on hosting a small gathering at my apartment. I hesitated. The memory of that night still sat like a bruise. Then I realized that reclaiming the date could be an act of healing. We ordered food, laughed, and passed Zoe around like a living, giggling symbol of resilience. Justin stopped by briefly to drop off a gift, a bracelet with Zoe's birthstone. He didn't stay. I appreciated that he respected my space. At one point, Lana asked if I still had the infamous breakup note. I admitted I did. It was tucked in a memory box along with Zoe's hospital bracelet, the positive pregnancy test, and the journal Justin had gifted me during his apology tour. That note wasn't a talisman of pain anymore. It was a reminder of how far I'd come. It's strange to look back on an object that once felt like a dagger and see it now as a catalyst. That note forced me to confront truths I had been ignoring. It pushed me into a place of independence I might not have chosen otherwise. It showed me the cracks in a relationship built on appearances. I don't believe everything happens for a reason in the trite sense. I do believe that we can find meaning in what happens. I kept the note not to dwell on the hurt but to someday show Zoe that her mother faced a moment of profound disrespect and chose to rise above it. In therapy, I unpacked the layers of trauma, the public humiliation, the betrayal by a friend, the stress of pregnancy, the fears of postpartum depression. My therapist reminded me that perinatal depression is not a sign of weakness or failure. It's a medical condition influenced by hormones, genetics, and life stressors. She congratulated me for building a support system and seeking help proactively. When moments of sadness hit, like when I saw couples strolling with babies and had fleeting pangs of envy, I acknowledged the feeling without letting it define my reality. Mindfulness exercises I learned in prenatal yoga continued to help. Practicing non-judgmental awareness of my thoughts and sensations allowed me to ride waves of emotion without being swept away. Peace of mind isn't a destination. It's a practice. Some days, peace of mind looks like letting dishes pile up while I nap with my daughter. Some days, it looks like asking Barbara to take Zoe for an afternoon so I can walk around Target alone. There were times when postpartum anxiety gripped me. I would wake to check if Zoe was breathing, even when the baby monitor displayed her chest rising and falling. I would spiral into what-ifs about money, about raising her alone, about dating again. The statistics I had read reminded me that anxiety often co-occurs with postpartum depression and that up to 17% of postpartum women experience it. Knowing this normalized my experience. I spoke about it with other moms. I talked to my therapist. I practiced self-compassion. Slowly, the edge dulled. Eli and I continued to see each other. He understood that Zoe came first. When we went on dates, they often involved stroller-friendly activities, farmers markets, walks by the river, story time at the library. He never tried to insert himself into parenting decisions prematurely. He asked me if I felt comfortable introducing him to Zoe as more than the delivery guy. I appreciated his sensitivity. Justin remained civil. He didn't sabotage my budding relationship. Perhaps therapy had taught him that controlling my life was no longer his role. He still had moments of jealousy. He once commented on Eli's lack of a steady job, forgetting how precarious his own finances had been. I rolled my eyes. I wasn't choosing a partner for financial stability, but for kindness and integrity. When Zoe was 9 months old, I took her to a Parent and Me swim class. Watching her chubby arms paddle through the water, her eyes wide with wonder, I felt an almost physical sensation of healing. This was the life I had built. Yes, it looked nothing like the one I had planned on that night before my birthday. But in many ways, it was richer. I had learned to advocate for myself, to set boundaries, to ask for help. I had learned that resilience is not a solitary endeavor. It's woven from the threads of community support and self-belief. As I write this, Zoe is sleeping in her crib, a soft snore escaping her tiny nose. The giant teddy bear Justin brought to the hospital sits in the corner of the nursery, currently serving as a barricade during tummy time. Barbara's text messages pop up periodically with photos of her toddler wearing a cape. Eli's number is saved in my phone under Eli because he once delivered an absurd amount of broccoli by accident. My mom's voice echoes in my mind, reminding me to rest when I can. Justin sent a message last week asking if I could send him the recipe for my grandmother's lasagna. He wants to try cooking for his dad group potluck. I sent it. Co-parenting means sharing the past and present in ways I never anticipated. This story started with a humiliating birthday party and a cruel note. It progressed through betrayal, pregnancy, legal battles, and emotional upheaval. It could have hardened me, and in some ways it did. But it also softened me in places that had been guarded for too long. It opened me to new forms of love. Maternal love that surges like a tidal wave, friendship that holds you up when you sink, and romantic love that grows slowly and steadily, like a plant turning toward light. I'm not the woman I was when Justin handed me that box. That woman believed stability came from external structures, a relationship, an apartment, a set of plans. This woman knows stability comes from within and from the community you cultivate. That woman doubted her worth when someone else deemed her useless. This woman knows her value is intrinsic and not subject to someone else's opinion. That woman might have let shame keep her quiet. This woman shares her story because vulnerability fosters connection. If reading this helps another person feel less alone in their messy human journey, then recounting my pain and growth has been worthwhile. As for Justin, his story intertwines with mine in ways that neither of us can rewrite. I don't hate him. Hate would tether me to anger. I feel gratitude that he gave me the greatest gift by accident, the push to rebuild my life on my own terms and the daughter who lights up my world. I hope he continues to grow, not because I want him back, but because our child deserves 2 healthy parents. I also hope Maria finds healing and learns to trust her own intuition. I hope Barbara receives as much love as she gives. I hope Eli completes his degree and continues making corny jokes. I hope every person reading this who has been knocked down by betrayal or humiliation realizes that the worst moments do not define us. It's how we rise afterward that shapes our story. When Zoe is old enough, I will tell her the story of her beginnings. I will show her the note, the positive pregnancy test, the ultrasound pictures. I will tell her about the party, about the cake that was cut with tears behind my smile, about the friend who stayed on my couch and whispered plans into the dawn. I will tell her that being blindsided does not mean you are broken. Sometimes it means life is rerouting you to a better destination. I will tell her about postpartum statistics, that 1 in 8 women experience depression after birth, that feelings of sadness and hopelessness can be medical conditions requiring help, that seeking support is a strength, not a weakness. I will tell her about mindfulness and peace of mind, and how practicing awareness and compassion for yourself can carry you through the hardest moments. I will tell her about boundaries and forgiveness, about how to recognize apologies backed by actions versus apologies meant to pacify. Most of all, I will tell her that her arrival in my life was a gift beyond measure, that because of her, I learned the full spectrum of my own resilience. That her existence turned a note meant to dismiss me into a catalyst for transformation, and that no matter what storms she faces, she can draw on the strength of the women who came before her, the ones who smiled through humiliation and built new lives from the ashes.